Tradition, when understood, is a flame that gives light, but when followed blindly, it becomes a fire that burns everything in its path. Too often people confuse wisdom with habit, truth with repetition, and loyalty with obedience. The purpose of tradition was never to imprison the mind, it was to guide it. Yet over time, many have turned living wisdom into lifeless routine. What I stand against is not the beauty of tradition, but the blindness that hides behind it. The real fight is not against what our ancestors created, but against the stupidity that refuses to grow beyond imitation. Because when the mind stops questioning, when the spirit stops evolving, even truth begins to decay. Tradition is not the enemy. Blind obedience is. There is great beauty in the roots of our culture, in the wisdom passed down through generations, in the rituals that carry the energy of those who came before us. But when those same traditions become walls that prevent us from thinking, they lose their essence. What was once alive becomes hollow. What was once a guide becomes a cage. The problem is not in tradition itself. It's in the human tendency to worship form over understanding, to follow patterns without knowing why. Many people defend traditions not because they understand them, but because they fear what happens if they let go. Fear keeps them bound. Fear makes them confuse security with wisdom. They repeat words without meaning, gestures without intention, habits without awareness. But truth cannot survive in the absence of awareness. A tradition without consciousness is just an echo, loud, familiar, but empty. It sounds strong, but it carries no life. The ones who created those traditions were thinkers, explorers, and seekers. They were not afraid to question. They looked at life directly, understood its nature, and expressed that understanding in ways that suited their time. They didn't cling to imitation. They embodied discovery. But over centuries, people stopped walking the path themselves and began worshiping the footprints left behind. They memorized the form but lost the freedom that created it. And when form becomes sacred, evolution dies. To be truly alive is to understand the essence of things. It means to see through the surface and reach the truth hidden underneath. The wise never reject tradition because it holds the seeds of truth, but they also do not become slaves to it. They learn from it, extract its essence, and let go of what no longer serves. That is how tradition stays alive, by breathing, by adapting, by evolving through those who live it consciously. But mindless obedience kills that life. It replaces understanding with imitation. And when imitation becomes the highest virtue, stupidity takes root. People start arguing about the correct way to perform something they don't even understand. They defend what they were told, not what they have discovered. They call it respect, but it's fear disguised as loyalty. Real respect is to understand the heart of the tradition and allow it to grow with you. If your mind is closed, even the most sacred truth becomes poison because it no longer flows through you. It gets trapped in your rigidity. The moment you refuse to question, to learn, to test, you stop being a living being and become a repeating machine. That is the essence of mindless stupidity, not the lack of intelligence, but the refusal to use it. To honor tradition is not to bow down to its outer form, it's to embody its inner light. It's to recognize the intention behind the action, the wisdom behind the ritual, the awareness behind the words. When you understand that you no longer copy, you create, you no longer guard the ashes of the past, you carry its fire forward. That's how the spirit of tradition continues to live through time. The one who questions does not disrespect. He revives. He removes the dust that time has gathered over the truth. Because truth does not fear being questioned. Only lies and ignorance do. The wise man challenges not to destroy, but to purify. And through that purification, tradition finds new strength. It transforms, becoming relevant again for a new generation. So when I say I am against mindless stupidity, not against tradition, I am against anything that blinds the human spirit. Anything that makes a man stop thinking, stop evolving, stop seeking. I am against that blind comfort that makes people say, "This is how it has always been done," instead of asking, "Is this still true?" Because life is not meant to stand still, it's meant to flow. And anything that resists that flow eventually becomes corruption. There is nothing noble about obedience without understanding. True nobility is born from awareness. When you follow tradition consciously, you transform it into art. But when you follow it blindly, you turn it into habit. And habit without understanding is death disguised as discipline. It looks stable, but it's lifeless. The path of wisdom is balance. You respect the past, but you live in the present. You learn from the old, but you keep your mind open to the new. You take the best of what was, and you refine it with the clarity of what is. That is how growth happens. Not by rejecting tradition, and not by worshiping it, but by merging understanding with awareness. The truth is simply, you can never be free while you're copying. Freedom only comes when you begin to understand. When you see beyond the words, beyond the rituals, beyond the appearances. Then you no longer act out of fear, but out of clarity. You no longer repeat, you respond. You no longer defend, you express. And that is the difference between the one who lives in awareness and the one who lives in imitation. Tradition, when lived consciously, becomes wisdom. But when followed blindly, it becomes stupidity wearing the mask of virtue. The choice is yours, to follow the shadow of tradition or to awaken the light that created it. Tradition in its purest form is wisdom preserved through time. It carries the lessons, the struggles, and the victories of those who came before us. It's the echo of experience that whispers through the generations, guiding us when we are lost, anchoring us when the world feels unstable. But when that wisdom becomes frozen, when it stops adapting, when it stops breathing, it loses its essence. It becomes a cage built by the very hands that once sought freedom. I am not against tradition. I am against the mindless repetition of patterns that no longer serve life. There's a difference between respecting the past and being enslaved by it. Respect is understanding the value of what was, learning from it, and using it to build something new. Slavery is obeying the past blindly, even when it leads you toward destruction. When people cling to outdated beliefs without questioning their purpose, they do not honor tradition, they distort it. The living spirit of tradition is not meant to imprison your potential, it is meant to evolve with your consciousness. Every great movement, every advancement in thought or art or discipline came from someone who dared to ask, why? And then followed that question into truth, no matter where it led. Mindless stupidity thrives where questioning dies. When we stop asking, when we stop observing, when we stop being curious, we lose the essence of human progress. Blind acceptance is not wisdom. It is laziness disguised as respect. Many people hide behind tradition because it's easier to follow a pattern than to face the uncertainty of creating something new. They think obedience equals honor, but in reality, it's fear of rejection, fear of change, fear of standing alone. Yet, what is life without growth? What is mastery without evolution? A stagnant pond may reflect the sky, but it eventually rots. The river that flows remains pure. Tradition becomes powerful only when it is lived consciously. To live consciously is to embody the lessons of the past while remaining awake to the needs of the present. You cannot live like your ancestors did, because your world is not their world. Their struggles were different. Their paths were shaped by challenges you will never face. If you copy their form without understanding their spirit, you miss the meaning entirely. The masters of old did not want you to become their shadow. They wanted you to find your own light. They passed on tools, not prisons. I have seen many who imitate the external gestures of greatness, but fail to grasp the inner fire that made it alive. They repeat movements without understanding purpose. They quote words without feeling their truth. They follow systems without knowing why they were created. This is how mediocrity hides behind ritual. Real mastery requires awareness. It demands that you stay awake, that you question, that you experiment, that you remain fluid in thought. Water adapts to every container, yet it never loses its nature. Be like that, formless, adaptable, alive. Tradition without awareness is like a sword without an edge. It may look powerful, but it cannot cut through illusion. The edge of the sword is awareness. It's what gives tradition life. When you see through the patterns and understand their purpose, you can refine them, reshape them, make them your own. That is how progress is born, not from rebellion for the sake of rebellion, but from evolution that honors the essence of what came before. So, I say again, I am not against tradition. I am against the dullness of mind that repeats without reason. I am against the comfort that hides behind the excuse of, this is how it has always been. Life itself does not cling to the past. It renews with every sunrise. Every breath you take is a new moment, an invitation to live consciously. Do not be afraid to evolve. Do not be afraid to question. To truly honor tradition, you must keep it alive, not embalmed. When the mind becomes attached to patterns, it begins to decay. Attachment to form blinds us from seeing truth as it unfolds in the present moment. The problem is not the method, not the practice, not even the belief. It is the attachment that turns them rigid. When people follow something blindly, they stop being alive within it. They become mechanical, moving like clockwork, repeating words and actions without understanding their essence. It is not tradition that imprisons them. It is their fear of letting go. They believe that to release the old is to lose security, but in reality, it is the only way to discover life's deeper rhythm. A wise person does not cling, they flow. They use what is useful, discard what is not, and keep their mind open. This flexibility is not disrespect, it is intelligence. The greatest truths remain the same, but their expressions must evolve with time. What served a person centuries ago might not serve you today. To copy it without awareness is to live in illusion. You cannot walk another's path and expect to arrive at your own destination. The footsteps of others can guide you, but your steps must be your own. Too many people confuse imitation with respect. They mimic gestures, phrases, or rituals thinking that mastery lies in perfect repetition. But imitation without understanding is hollow. It's like trying to play music without hearing its rhythm. You may hit the right notes, but there will be no soul in it. The true artist, the true warrior, the true thinker, each takes what exists and breathes life into it. They make it their own through experience. Tradition gives you the framework, but it is your awareness that fills it with meaning. The moment you cling to the shell, you lose the spirit. The essence of all great philosophies and disciplines was never about repeating. They were about awakening. The founders, the masters, the thinkers of every age, they broke boundaries because they saw beyond the surface. They questioned what others accepted. They were not rebels without purpose. They were seekers of truth who understood that truth cannot be confined to form. Truth is like water. It adapts, it flows, it takes the shape of the moment. When your mind is rigid, you lose touch with that flow. The danger of mindless repetition is that it creates illusion. You start to think that because you follow a system, you understand it. You believe that because you repeat a phrase, you embody its meaning. But knowledge without realization is just memory. It cannot transform you. Real understanding comes through direct experience, through testing, questioning, and allowing life to reveal itself to you. That is how you turn borrowed wisdom into living truth. There will always be those who fear this kind of freedom. They will cling to the comfort of rules, thinking that safety lies in sameness. But the universe does not reward stagnation, it rewards movement. Life itself evolves through challenge, adaptation, and renewal. You are part of that same rhythm. To resist it is to fight against your own nature. You were not created to live inside someone else's idea of truth. You were born to discover it for yourself. So when I say not to cling to form, it is not to reject what came before, but to keep it alive through awareness. Use tradition as a mirror, not a mask. Let it guide you, not control you. Let it awaken your understanding, not dull your perception. The moment you can see the difference between the living essence and the empty form, you begin to walk freely. You begin to live truth, not just talk about it. True intelligence is not about how much you know, but about how clearly you see. Many people fill their minds with facts, beliefs, and theories, yet remain blind to what is right before them. Their thoughts are loud, their opinions rigid, and their understanding shallow. They mistake memorization for mastery and tradition for truth. But awareness is something deeper. It is not learned through words, but awakened through silence. It is seeing without distortion, perceiving without the filter of fear, ego, or conditioning. When the mind is still, truth reveals itself effortlessly. You cannot fight mindless stupidity with more noise. You cannot awaken the blind by shouting louder. The mind that is filled with conclusions cannot receive anything new. To see clearly, one must first empty. When the cup is already full, even the purest water will overflow and be wasted. The same is true for the mind. As long as it clings to what it already knows, it cannot grow. This is why so many people live in repetition, acting out the same patterns and calling it wisdom. They defend their ignorance as if it were identity. Real clarity comes from humility, from the willingness to say, I don't know. Only then does learning begin. The wise are never in a hurry to prove themselves. They observe, they question, they listen. They are not confined by the past, but neither do they reject it. They take what is useful and release what is not. They allow their understanding to evolve naturally. That is why their wisdom feels alive, because it is not rooted in fear, but in awareness. There is a deep difference between intellect and understanding. Intellect analyzes, understanding feels. Intellect divides, understanding unites. Intellect is quick to argue, to label, to categorize. Understanding simply watches. It does not rush to judgment. When you act from understanding, your actions carry harmony. When you act from intellect alone, your actions carry conflict. The world today is full of intellect and empty of wisdom because people have forgotten how to be present. They live in reaction instead of reflection. To develop awareness, one must train the mind to observe rather than control. Look at your own thoughts without resistance. Watch how fear disguises itself as caution, how pride wears the mask of confidence, how insecurity hides behind aggression. When you can see these movements clearly, they begin to lose power over you. Awareness is not about suppressing the dark. It is about seeing it so clearly that it dissolves in the light of understanding. That is how one becomes free, not through force, but through seeing. Tradition, when understood through awareness, becomes a tool of growth. But when followed blindly, it becomes a prison. The same sword that protects can also wound, depending on how it is held. Awareness teaches you how to hold that sword wisely. It gives you the ability to see where others act unconsciously. It allows you to rise above reaction and choose your response with clarity. And when you reach that level of perception, you no longer act from the mind alone, you act from truth. The world doesn't need more noise, it needs more awareness. When the mind grows still, perception sharpens. And from that stillness, the right action arises naturally. That is the power of clarity. It does not fight darkness, it simply illuminates it. Every battle worth fighting begins within. The real war is not against people, systems, or traditions. It is against your own ignorance, fear, and ego. You cannot bring clarity to the world if your own mind is clouded. You cannot stand against mindless stupidity if you are still enslaved by your own. Before you challenge the world, you must confront yourself. That is the hardest fight, because your greatest enemy often wears your own face. It whispers doubts in your mind, convinces you to stay silent, tells you to fit in. It makes you believe that going along with the crowd is safer than standing alone. But there is no safety in blindness. There is only slow decay. Many people spend their lives trying to change others without ever understanding themselves. They argue, debate, and condemn, thinking they are defending truth. But how can one defend truth when they have not seen it clearly within themselves? Truth is not something to be shouted. It is something to be lived. When your actions align with what you know to be right, you become the example others cannot ignore. That is the true revolution, to embody what you believe. When you begin to awaken, you will notice how much of what surrounds you is built on illusion. You will see people pretending to be wise while living in fear, speaking of love while harboring envy, chasing status while losing peace. You will see minds addicted to distraction and tongues addicted to argument. But you will also see something else. You will see that all of this begins with a lack of self-awareness. People do not act foolishly because they are evil. They act foolishly because they are unconscious. They follow patterns inherited from others without questioning them. And so the cycle continues generation after generation until someone chooses to wake up. To stand against mindless stupidity is not to hate those who sleep. It is to refuse to join them. It is to stay awake when it would be easier to close your eyes. It is to think when the world demands that you obey. It is to listen to your inner knowing, even when your voice trembles. This requires discipline, mental, emotional, and spiritual. You must train your mind to stay calm in chaos, to stay true in temptation, to stay silent when silence speaks louder than words. When your awareness grows, your actions become deliberate. You no longer react to everything that provokes you. You no longer seek validation from those who cannot see. You act from stillness, not impulse. And in that stillness, you discover that truth does not need defenders. It only needs those who live it. Each time you choose awareness over ignorance, presence over distraction, courage over conformity, you are breaking the chain that has bound countless minds before you. You are becoming free. The greatest victory is not in defeating another, but in conquering yourself. When you win that battle, the world can no longer control you. No insult can wound you, no praise can blind you, no fear can hold you. You walk through the noise untouched, because you have found silence within. And from that silence, your clarity becomes a weapon sharper than any sword, a light that no darkness can extinguish. There will always come a moment when you must decide whether to follow the crowd or follow your conscience. That is the moment that defines who you truly are. The easy path will always invite you. It will whisper comfort, promise acceptance, and assure you that safety lies in numbers. But truth does not live in the crowd. It lives in the quiet courage of the one who stands apart. To stand against mindless stupidity, you must be willing to stand alone. Not out of arrogance, but out of integrity. You must be willing to lose approval, to keep your soul intact. Most people are not evil. They are simply afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of uncertainty, afraid of thinking for themselves. They would rather be wrong with the crowd than right by themselves. That is how stupidity thrives, not through malice, but through cowardice. The world does not fall apart because of the strength of the wicked, but because of the silence of those who know better. Each time you remain silent when you should speak, each time you conform when you should resist, you give stupidity another victory. You strengthen the very ignorance you claim to despise. But courage is not loud. It does not need to shout to be strong. Sometimes courage is simply holding your ground when every voice around you tells you to move. Sometimes it is walking away from noise to preserve your peace. Sometimes it is refusing to participate in lies, even when truth costs you your comfort. To live with awareness is not to fight every battle. It is to choose your battles wisely and fight them completely. When you act with clarity, you do not need validation. When you live with truth, the outcome no longer controls you. It is easy to fight an enemy you can see. It is harder to face the one within. The mind loves to seek external villains. It wants to point fingers, assign blame, and declare itself righteous. But as long as you see stupidity only in others, you remain blind to the parts of it still living in you. The real revolution begins when you see how your own habits, fears, and judgments mirror the ignorance you criticize. True wisdom humbles you. It makes you less eager to fight others and more eager to purify yourself. When you reach that understanding, your presence becomes your protest. You no longer waste words trying to change the unready. Instead, your example begins to speak louder than any argument. You move through the world with awareness, discipline, and grace. People may misunderstand you, mock you, or call you strange. But remember, every mind that challenged the blindness of the world was called strange before it was called wise. You must not shrink to fit into a world that refuses to open its eyes. There is a deep peace that comes when you no longer need the world to agree with you. You begin to live not for approval, but for alignment. You stop chasing the noise of others and start listening to the stillness of your own truth. And in that stillness, you realize something profound. You were never meant to fit into the madness. You were meant to rise above it. The path of truth is narrow, but it is clear. Those who walk it do not seek followers, they seek understanding. They do not fight to destroy, but to awaken. So, when the world becomes loud and foolish, do not join the noise, become the calm within it. That calm, that awareness, that clarity. This is the power that defeats mindless stupidity without ever raising a fist.